All right, so are you ready to dive into some seriously cool genetics today?
Always.
Because we were talking palmetto corn snakes, and
Yeah.
these guys have a super interesting genetic quirk.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen them? Like pictures?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They're mostly white, right, with these little bits of color here and there.
Yeah, they're stunning.
But some of them get these like bulging eyes,
Yeah, the bug eyes.
the bug eyes, right? And that's what we're looking into today.
Yeah, that's the mystery we're going to try and untangle.
Exactly. And we've got this awesome paper by Brian Lobsher.
He's great.
Yeah, he really knows his corn snakes.
Yeah.
So we're going to use his research to try and figure out why some of these palmettos have these crazy bug eyes while others don't.
Yeah, and it all comes down to this gene called MITFs.
MITF.
Yeah, stands for melanocyte-inducing transcription factor.
Okay, so like pigment stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
As you can probably guess from the name, it's like a major player in how pigmentation works.
Okay. But what's really cool about Lobsher's work is that it shows that MITF does way more than just control color.
Like it's involved in the development of different tissues in the snake. And that's where those bug eyes come into play.
So it's not just like an aesthetic thing.
No.
This one gene is messing with how different parts of the snake are actually developing.
Exactly. It's pretty wild. Think of it this way. You've got these neural crest cells, which are kind of like stem cells that can turn into a bunch of different things, like pigment cells, parts of the skull, even some neural tissues.
Wow, okay.
And MITF is like the conductor telling those cells what to become. So when there's a mutation in that gene, it can cause a whole cascade of effects throughout the snake's development.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So all palmetto corn snakes have this MITF mutation, right?
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
gives them that unique look.
Right.
But Lobsher found that only 22% of the snakes in his study had the bug eyes.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they all have bug eyes if they all have the same mutation?
That is the million-dollar question. It's called partial penetrance, and it's one of the things that makes genetics so complex. Like, you can have all the ingredients for a cake, but you might still end up with something that looks and tastes totally different.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So what else is going on here? Are there other genes, like stepping in and changing how that MITF gene is working?
You got it. It's likely a combination of factors. You've got modifier genes, environmental influences, maybe even just some random quirks in development.
So it's not just one gene equals one outcome.
Nope. It's this whole network of interactions.
Wow. It's kind of blowing my mind that this one tiny gene can have such a big impact.
Yeah.
And, I'm thinking like, are there implications here that go beyond just corn snakes?
Oh, absolutely.
Could this research help us understand developmental issues in other species too?
For sure. There's actually a human condition called Waardenburg syndrome, and it can cause hearing loss, vision problems, and even changes in pigmentation. And guess what? It's all linked to mutations in the MITF gene.
No way.
Yeah.
So we could learn something about this human condition just by studying these snakes and their crazy eyes.
Yeah, exactly. That's the beauty of genetics. The same basic mechanisms are at work across so many different species. So what we learn in one organism can often teach us about life in general.
That's incredible. So now I'm thinking about the breeders who work with palmetto corn snakes. If that bug eye trait has like a 22% chance of showing up even when you breed two normal-looking snakes,
Right?
that's a pretty big deal for them, right?
It is. Breeders are basically manipulating genes to get certain traits, but it's not always as straightforward as it sounds.
Yeah.
They have to think about the potential consequences.
So you could be trying to get those cool white scales,
Right.
but accidentally increase the chances of your snakes having eye problems.
Exactly. That's why understanding the genetics is so crucial. It's not just about aesthetics, it's about responsible breeding practices.
It's about the well-being of the animal.
Absolutely.
So what do you think? Does this research change how we should think about breeding palmetto corn snakes?
Oh, yeah. It definitely makes things more complicated.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really interesting for me. Because if we can figure out exactly what's causing these bug eyes,
Yeah.
we might be able to predict it
Right.
and maybe even prevent it from happening.
Okay, so if it's not JTT, the MITF mutation, what else is going on?
Yeah.
You mentioned modifier genes before.
Yeah.
Are there any other genes that we know of that might be involved?
Not specifically in corn snakes, but there's a ton of research in other animals that can give us some clues.
Okay.
Like in mice, there are a bunch of genes that interact with MITF and affect eye development. One of them is called PT6. It's super important for forming the eye itself.
Okay.
So variations in PT6 could be messing with the effects of that MITF mutation.
So we can look at what's happening in other animals and try to apply it to these snakes.
Exactly. It's like detective work.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
We're using clues from different sources to get a better understanding of the bigger picture.
And the more we learn about how these genes interact,
Yeah.
the better we'll be able to understand development.
Absolutely. not just in corn snakes, but in other species too.
Makes you wonder just how many of these hidden genetic interactions are out there.
Oh, I'm sure we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah.
That's what makes this field so exciting. There's always something new to discover.
It feels like we're just starting to uncover the mystery here. We went from these beautiful snakes with their unique colors
Right.
to this whole complex world of genes and development.
It is amazing.
We've learned so much from just this one study.
And we haven't even talked about environmental factors.
Oh, right. Like what kind of things?
Well, things like temperature during development, nutrition, even exposure to certain chemicals. All of those things can affect how genes are expressed.
So you're saying that even if two snakes have the exact same genes, their environment could still make a difference in whether or not they get bug eyes?
It's definitely a possibility.
Wow.
Think about identical twins in humans. They have the same DNA,
Right.
but they're not always exactly alike. Their environment and their experiences shape who they are.
That's a great
Right,
statement.
so it's not just nature, it's nurture too. It's this whole interplay between genes and the environment.
It's not just a fixed blueprint.
Yeah, exactly. And the more we can figure out how those things interact, the more we'll understand about how life works.
This deep dive has taken us down some pretty unexpected paths,
It has.
but I'm really enjoying it.
Me too. It
Yeah.
just goes to show that even a simple question
Yeah.
can lead to some really amazing discoveries.
So where do we go from here? Like if someone's listening and they're totally fascinated by this whole reptile genetics thing,
Yeah.
where should they start?
Well, Lobster's paper is a great place to begin.
Okay.
It's called The Role of Melanocyte-Inducing Transcription Factor, MITF, in Pigmentation and Arcular Development in Palmetto Cornsnakes.
Catchy.
Yeah, it's a mouthful, but it's really well written and easy to understand.
And are there any other resources for people who want to learn more? Like beyond just this one study?
Oh yeah, tons. There are all sorts of scientific journals, online forums where breeders and enthusiasts share their knowledge, even university courses if you really want to dive in.
Sounds like a rabbit hole I could get lost in.
It is, but it's a fun one.
Who knows? Maybe someone listening to this will become a herpetological geneticist someday.
Maybe. It all starts with a little curiosity.
It's amazing how one little mystery, like these bug-eyed snakes, can lead you down such a fascinating path.
It really is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the biggest thing is that genetics is way more complicated than we think.
Yeah.
It's not just about genes. It's about how those genes interact with each other, with the environment, even with random chance.
And what we learn from one species can often teach us about others.
Absolutely.
It's like every living thing has all these secrets just waiting to be discovered.
Right. And who knows what those secrets might tell us about ourselves and the world around us.
Well said. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of palmetto cornsnakes and their bug-eyed mysteries.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It was awesome having you. And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop learning.
Stay curious.